to things later if you want to do that, and feel free to share it with friends too. We know that everybody couldn't be here today, but at least we'll learn on our first try, and then we'll go from here. Besides putting this video on our website, which we're going to do, the Zoom meeting, we also are making a number of videos, how-to videos for QuickBooks that are going to be posted on our website as well. Randy Morris, who is in the meeting, I can see here, is usually the host for our meetups, and he's working on the videos, as is Jim Shander and Angie and Jen as well. So just we've recently redone our website. It was good to start with, but Angie's made it even better, so we love that. It's fiscalfoundations.com, and we're continually adding information on there that would be of help to you in form of videos, blogs. Anytime you want to purchase software, need new software, you can also do that right on our website. So we're trying to make this as convenient for you as we possibly can. In case you're thinking of, or you know someone who's wanting to start with QuickBooks, or maybe your business is growing, so you're thinking that you need a more robust form of QuickBooks, and that would be true mainly of manufacturing and distribution businesses needing to move to QuickBooks Enterprise Solutions, because most of you are probably on Premier, is most likely. Then it's good to give us a call and talk about which version matches your needs best. And Allison is our QuickBooks Solutions Manager, and her number is 612-868-2800. And she can advise you by asking you some questions about your business on which type of software would be best for you. Also, QuickBooks, is certainly promotes their QuickBooks Online version, because everyone is loving the idea of being online, being able to do their accounting anytime from anywhere, and having other members of their staff work on it as well. And most of our clients use desktop, and we really recommend that as being the best software package. But what we've done now to keep that same quality of software, but to be online for the convenience, is we put the desktop version in cloud service. We do that. We've been that way for several years now. We absolutely love it, because we have staff in Texas and Arizona, Wisconsin, Minnesota. So any of us can go in and work on our client files that we have on our server anytime. And it's just so incredibly convenient for everyone that we really recommend it. And there are a couple of different cloud services that we can discuss and recommend to you. Angie does the quotes, so she can answer a lot of questions about the cloud services and what the costs are and that sort of thing. I have a new project going now called Build Your Business, Live Your Dream. And I'm really excited about this one, and have 2 or 3 people on our team who are going to be supporting me in that. What it is a complete online video training program for new business owners, and also for current business owners who are looking to improve their business. So what we cover in the program, in the basic program, is starting with the business idea, the business concept, moving to creating the model of the business so that you understand all of the different portions of it that you need to address as a new business owner, or even readdress as a current business owner. And then we go from concept, business model, business plan, then setting up the accounting, and understanding the reporting and financial management. And as you've probably heard us say before, our mission is improving the success and the success rate of small businesses, because we know that over 72% of the reasons small businesses fail in the first 4 years is because of lack of understanding of accounting and financial management. So we're setting out to try to solve that problem. And so we hope to create quite a large network of pro advisors around the country, and there are about over 3,000 of those as affiliates, so that we can get the workshop out there. And I think we'll also need a lot of help from people supporting, because as many of you know, our philosophy in business and our is all about relationship. So we want personal interaction with participants from our course. And so that's going to be, I think, one thing that makes our course a little bit different than a lot of people's. A lot of accounting courses are just demonstrations of software or walking you through a series of slides, but this is much more interactive than that. And so we're really looking forward to getting this going. So it will be launched this year, and you can see the first video preview at another website that links to ours, and it's called mybizmydream.today. So my biz being B-I-Z, mydream.today, not .com. My business, my dream today. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. We're always open to suggestions and new ideas, and so feel free to share. Besides the basic program, we'll have special modules that deal with certain topics that are industry specific, like job costing for construction, like grant management for nonprofits, trust accounts for lawyers and real estate agents. So we have virtually every kind of business in our client list that one can imagine. So we're going to address whatever specific issues belong to, an industry. And then I'm also going to create a set of modules that you can use to train bookkeepers you hire to work in your business. So if they've not known QuickBooks before, it's demonstrations for how they do all the basic tasks in QuickBooks that you would have. We'll also include the accounting principles, because you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing before you start pressing those buttons. So anyway, that's where we're at, and we'll keep you posted about that, the progress of that program as we go along, our meetup group and our client list as well. So next we want to get to the topic at hand. I'm sure you've been working on all the same issues that we have for the past few weeks, and it's been pretty exhausting and nerve-wracking, I would describe it. Working at home is an option for a lot of us, but not everyone. So that requires a little bit of change in how you're doing your work. I've been spending a lot of time with clients on applying for the Payroll Protection Program loans and others, and that process has just been incredibly difficult with the changing of rules as we go along, and banks running out of money and all this kind of thing, little communication. So we'll be glad when this period is over on that. But there's just been a lot to try to deal with, not to mention putting on your creative hat to think about how you're going to keep revenue coming in during this difficult period. So that's why I asked Andrea to speak to us, lead our meeting today, rather than doing our usual how-to on QuickBooks. She's a small business owner too. She owns 2 companies. She's a client, been doing her books for Pop Associates for quite a few years, and she'll tell you what that stands for. So she's a coach, and she's not only a client, but a long-term friend of my sister-in-law. So I'm very happy to have her join us today. So thank you for everyone for coming and trying out this new medium. And Andrea, I'll turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, as Linda said, we've been sister-in-laws now for 40 years.
Oh my God.
You probably didn't know it was that long. 40 years. Yes. That's
I think Ken mentioned that to me yesterday.
Yeah. 40 years. So So that's more, like we've been working together for at least a decade, so probably a little bit longer than that. As
Yeah.
Linda said, I own two businesses. I started the first one back in 2013, and I started the second one in 2018. And I'm a performance consultant, leadership development, a program leader and designer. I do executive coaching. And the thing I saw why I have two businesses is that POP Associates, which POP stands for the practice of practicing, and that business is mainly directed toward mid-sized to larger companies. But I kept feeling this pull, like, being a small business person, I could just see that there's so many times that some of the stuff that I do would be appropriate and useful and helpful for people who are a sole proprietor, or maybe have, one person and two part-time people or something like that. So that's why I created Community Journeys. That's a more of an online business, an online community, doesn't require as much in-person kind of stuff, etc. And so second business is Community Journeys. And you can find POP Associates online, popassociates.com, which is plural associates, and then Community Journeys, and I'll show those to you in a bit. So what I've been working with people on, and frankly, this has been for either large or small or mid-sized companies since the lockdown, the virus, et cetera. And I do business globally. So I'm working with people all over the world. I talked to a woman in India this morning about what they're going through. And it's the same everywhere. It doesn't matter what kind of business that you're operating. Even I've got clients who are in essential businesses. I've got clients who aren't essential but can do their business from home. So their business hasn't stopped. But everybody's dealing with something similar, and that is that the virus has caused many companies to have to pivot. Either they've pivoted with how they work together, they've pivoted their actual content, like how, like what they're selling or how they're selling it, or they've had to completely rethink their strategy. And sales has changed. If you're somebody who sells in person, all of a sudden that has really dramatically shifted. So lots going on. And what I wanted to talk about today, and Linda and I had talked about this, thinking about what you all might find most supportive, is with everything changing, how do you stay in effective action? I find myself just busy all the time, right? And some of it is not effective busyness, it's just busyness. And sometimes I find myself, thinking, okay, what should I be doing? Like, I know I need to do something. What is it I should be doing? So today I wanted to talk just about actions and practices, which are a subset of larger conversations, but all those would take us longer. So I thought best to talk about, like, okay, you've been shut down, so to speak, although some of you haven't, but how do you ramp to start up without necessarily being able to go out of your office or out of your home if you're working from home? And so I've got a couple of tips about that, ideas about that. And what I'd invite you to do as we talk is, if you've got a question, just put it right into the chat to everyone. And Linda will manage that, and she'll just let me know if there's questions in the chat. Feel free to ask a question anywhere along. I will do Q&A at the end, but I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. It's not that formal of a presentation. And I might even ask a question or two of you and ask you to respond. So you can respond either in the chat or you can respond by unmuting yourself. So any questions or just anything on anyone's mind before we start? And just remember, if you do, you have to unmute. Okay, all right then, let's go. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can see the some of the slides that I made up. Desktop. All right. Okay, so here's where we're headed. So generally when we think about performance, and that's one of the things that people have been looking at in their businesses, is how do I keep my business performance up? Or how do I at least keep it at a level I can live with? So first, it's useful to define kind of how do we usually think about performance. because some of these things are things that, maybe you're working on one aspect of it and you sort of forgot about another part of it that you really need to operate from. So I'm just going to quick go over some of the main characteristics, what needs to be included when you're thinking about just performing you and or your business at its top level. So first, it always starts with, why are you doing this? And you want to be able to say it, even if you don't have to say it to anybody else, for yourself, right? So Linda, you guys have your why pretty well articulated. Can you say what that is? Why is Fiscal Foundations in business?
That's our mission statement, to improve the success and success rate of small businesses.
Right. And so everything that you do is around that why. And so all of your performance needs to be in that context. Otherwise, you're doing stuff that's not appropriate for your business. Might be stuff you can tick the boxes on, but doesn't necessarily provide for your mission or your why.
Mm-hmm.
And we call it a vision, a mission, or a why. All of them are, even though vision and mission are somewhat different. Mission is really what you're going to do. Vision is your aspiration. And why is, why are you doing it? But all of those are in the same vein. And some businesses will call them even by the same name, even though they are somewhat different. So that's the place where you start. If you're going to perform, you need to know why you're going to perform. Then you explore possible pathways. What are the ways that we could deliver that thing that's important to us, our vision, our mission, or our why? And then you choose which pathway to go. Okay, I'm going to offer coaching. Well, no, I'm going to offer in classroom leadership development. No, I'm going to offer, I'm going to go work for the SBA and I'm going to do consulting for small businesses. I mean, or I'm going to open up a business that supports small businesses with their accounting, their books, and their finance. All of those are possible pathways to the mission that Fiscal Foundations has. They chose the one for helping people with their accounting and their finances. So then you develop some goals. By the way, there's some new thinking out about goals now. I was just reading about this the other day. We've always operated on a create the goals and that's the best way to work. It turns out that research is showing, particularly in companies that are larger than a couple of people, that goals actually don't motivate people. Funny enough, who knew? Like all of us, but nonetheless, companies have continued to create goals forever. But if you're interested, that's something that I would recommend looking up, because there's now some new thinking about it. There's a book out called 9 Lies About Work, and they talk about this specifically because they've done a ton of research about it. Anyway, but in traditional performance, this is what we're doing. And then we design specific practices, like, we turn in our expense reports every, Friday. We visit with our clients in person. We do an intake session with people before we start doing their books, that, they fill out a form and they respond. And then we have a 1-hour conversation with them, or whatever it might be. We design things that we do every single time we go into certain activities of our business. We also create specific actions, which actions, I'll tell you what the difference is between practices and actions in a little bit, because that's the direction we're headed here. And then they determine what are the useful measures. So the goals are the things way out there, but the measures are, like how many cold calls did we make this week? If you do cold calls still, a lot of people don't do that anymore. So this was the traditional way of thinking of performance. And all of this works. People have been using variations of something like this for a really long time, at least since the turn of the 19th or the 1900s. So great, except COVID hits. And all of a sudden, everything goes, oh, wait a second. What do I need to do right now? Because I don't think all this is going to work. So one of the things that's happened is, depending on how long-term out you were thinking, like maybe you have a yearly plan for your business, or maybe you've got a 3-year strategy or a 5-year strategy. Some people have a 10-year strategy. Small businesses tend to not have strategies as long as some of the bigger corporations do. Although given the amount of time that bigger corporations are now staying alive, I think it used to be like 50 years or something. I think we're down to 17 years now for the big companies. Don't quote me on that. I just read about this, but the difference is astonishing in what's happened from the 1950s to now. So creating a 50-year plan, if you're on average only going to be in business 17 years, is probably not a great idea. And small businesses, we kind of know this. We can't necessarily plan the 10-year business strategy. We might have a personal 10-year plan, but not many of us actually do a longer strategy. But even if you had a 1-year plan, that 1-year plan is likely out the window. Either your business is doing way better than you expected, or it's doing not as good, or it's doing way worse. Rarely are people sort of on the same track that they were expecting since the shutdown. And even if you're mostly on the same track right now, the odds are that as the fallout from what's been happening with the economy keeps happening, you won't be on the same track. Either your business is in a place where you can take huge advantage of what's happening and you can explode your business, or maybe some of the people who would normally buy from you suddenly can't. So you have to either shift your customer base or your business is just going to keep declining. So particularly for, restaurants and stuff, and hotels and travel industry and things like that have really been hit hard. So, okay, what do we do about this, right? So before we go on, I'd just like to hear from a few of you about, what is happening with your business? Just, short. Are you finding it's mostly the same right now? It's a little bit less, it's dramatically impacted less, or it's actually better than you would have thought right now? So just, you can put that in the chat. Let's just hear, like what's happening. I'll give you a second to write down where you are. Are you doing better than you would have expected right now? Are you doing the same? Are you doing a little bit less, or are you doing dramatically less?
Jill says about the same.
Well, that's good.
I think about a couple of weeks ago, we noticed that the hours of consulting declined. And we have retail businesses who are totally shut down now. So obviously they can't do anything. I would say that's where we notice it most, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. So, and part of the reason why I'm asking is because I'm thinking about, what I want to offer next, and I can go a couple different directions. And depending on what's happening with your business, I want to make sure it's as, what I'm about to say is as valuable for you as possible. So, from what you're saying, Linda, do you think most of your businesses are about the same with the exception of retail and maybe, food service businesses? Or do you think that most of your businesses are experiencing some decline, or are they getting better? Or
I think we're going to have some of all the above. Retail is definitely shut down until they can open back up. Construction is an essential business, and so at least our bigger construction companies are still working, though they've gone after the payroll protection loans and that because they're not sure about how jobs are going to go. And there's some others. I have one company where they actually have two companies, and one is just processes orders. They don't go out and interact with people, so they're doing fine. But the other one sells to benches and stools to casinos, which are totally closed. So they just lost all their orders. So it's really an individual situation. So what the overall effect is yet, we don't know. But I did do a graph the other day of how of sales per year, sales per month, and projected what our sales this year would be compared to last year. And even though we hadn't seen much of a decline, it had already shown that the first quarter was down. And the last in 2008 to 2010, It went to the bottom because our clients couldn't afford bookkeeping. So that's why we got into training. We thought we better train them before, otherwise we'd have a big mess to clean up when we came back. So that's why we started this meetup group. And but it took 6 years to recover. So I'm not sure what this one's going to
Right.
result in.
Yeah, I had just read that we won't see as dramatic a decline for first quarter because January and February were mostly pretty good. Where they really the economists expect us to see, dramatic impact is going to be second quarter. So, we'll see that here in a couple of months. But in the meantime, my experience with, like I have a couple of construction clients and they're essential businesses. So there's been higher costs for them. But actually, one of the good things is the municipalities and the cities that they work with are saying, hey, there's not as much traffic. Can you get this done fast? Right.
Right.
So they're actually a little busier than usual. They haven't taken on too many new contracts though. So that's a little different for them so far.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping in Minnesota, that they get these projects done so we don't have to keep driving for months and months through those. Angie also pointed out that one positive aspect of our business was that most of our clients are on the cloud and they've transferred to remote work that way for accounting. So, we were prepared for that piece of this emergency.
And that's another kind of businesses. My experience is that the tech businesses, for the most part, are way busier.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The, companies that were getting venture capital, the venture capital didn't necessarily dry up. So that, those people were still holding that cash. One of my clients, their business, their venture capital, they happen to have the cash on hand already, so they don't even have to worry about it disappearing. But that cash is good for 3 years. I mean, they have enough for 3 years, no matter if they sell nothing. And they just happen to be a computer security sales. So their business, and people are buying on over Zoom or over Skype, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really been interesting. So it depends on what business you're in as to what's happening. So if you're interested in how do I take change for the times that I find myself in when things are not normal, even if your business is being successful right now. So here's what I'm looking at for that is some changes to that little performance bullets that we just saw. So just know what your why is. Don't worry about getting it stated. You don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have it on the wall, because what wall? But just know what it is, so that whatever it is you do, it's driven by why you do what you do. Because sometimes right now, if the business is going down, we can become more driven in survival. Like the why isn't to make money. We want that why, but that isn't why we're doing the specific thing we're doing. There's lots of different things one could do for money, but you're doing what you're doing. And there's a reason why you do that. So just know what that is, even if it's very simple or light, so that your actions are guided by that. Don't worry about exploring pathways and choosing right now. We are not in a long enough time frame to spend too much strategy on that. But I do recommend that you do scenario planning. And I've got a blog out on my LinkedIn. If you just look at Andrea Bednar on LinkedIn, you'll see under my articles, you'll see a blog about invincibility and power. It's called Part 2. But that'll give you very specific instructions about scenario planning, and it's scenario planning light. So the way I talk to people about this is think through what is the worst case from where we are right now, starting where we are right now. What is the worst case you could imagine in the next 6 months or till the end of the year, right? Like, worst case would be we have a second round of the viruses, or it comes out, spreads all over the country, and more businesses close and shut down, or the industry that I work with goes out of business. Like you're looking at worst case. And here's why you start with worst case, because a lot of times that's what we're thinking anyway. So if you start with your worst case scenario, you're able to kind of get out of your head any concerns or fear or anything that may be there. You may not be there, but a lot of people are. And then on the blog, it'll tell you, like, how do you do that? How do you think that through? And then the second scenario is, what if things mostly stay the same till the end of the year? Meaning that, yeah, we open back up and a few businesses are open, but it's still only 25% capacity allowed in a restaurant. And, of the 30 million people who've lost their jobs so far, that only 15 million are rehired. So we still have 15 million people who are not employed. Like in the second case scenario, you look at, given what's true right now, not your view of it, but what's actually objectively true right now, then you look at extrapolating that out, what's predictable. Not what's aspirational, not what's worst case scenario, but just, well, if this happens, then it's likely that this is going to happen, right? So in predictable, here in Texas, which is where I am, we are reopening a number of things, most everything tomorrow. Schools won't reopen, but restaurants, retail, nail salons, hairdressers, all of that reopens tomorrow. And just in the restaurants, we know that the restaurants have to stay, the facts are here, 25%, no more than 25% of their normal capacity can be in their dining room at any given time. All right, so then if you look at what's predictable given those facts, one of the things that's predictable is that the restaurants with only 25% capacity cannot afford to hire back all of their staff. They don't have enough customers for that. It's potentially predictable that people won't want to go to restaurants yet anyway. So even if they can open up to 25%, they don't have that amount showing up. So that's what happens in the second case scenario. So you take what's predictable, and then when you do, then you also look at what's the best case. Let's say we find a cure for this and everybody can get vaccinated, or we eliminate it by the end of May. Like that might, maybe by the end of June, that might be the best case scenario. If that happens, then what are the things that are likely to fall out from that scenario if the best happens? So this is kind of scenario planning light, because those three are, very distinct. It's not usually like that in life, but you do that because then what you do is you look at which scenario looks the most likely to me. The best case, the worst case, or the predictable case. And you might think that it doesn't have to be the predictable case. That's not a given. So you could say, you know what, I actually think it's going to get worse. Or you know what, I really think that this is going to be over like that. So then you look at, well, given the scenario that I've chosen, what would be the appropriate actions and practices for my business in that scenario? And then you do some planning for that. So that's one of the things that happens that can happen, or that I recommend happening when we're in this particular time. I wouldn't worry so much about developing your goals right now. It's just not, like you're just going to have to keep revising them anyway. It takes too much of your time. Right now, the job is stay in business, take advantage of opportunities, determine which scenario and which actions and practices go to that. And then at some point later, when things seem normal, whatever that's going to be, then it might be time for goal planning again. Designing specific practices, no more than 1 to 3, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And then creating specific actions each week for the coming week. So this is definitely short-termism. This is not thinking long-term. This is not a 3-year future or even next year's plan. This is keeping yourself in action effectively going forward, and planning weekly right now is my recommendation for people, even my essential business people whose businesses didn't stop. What needs to happen next week? Now, if you need to order equipment or supplies or things like that, you're going to have to think further out, because right now in some areas, supply chains are disrupted. And if you have, like my son owns a small farm, an urban farm, it's just under 3 acres. And one of the things that's happening, they pivoted, they sold to restaurants. So all of a sudden in 1 week, their business just disappeared. And so they pivoted to sell retail, which was not what they were going to do. But they pivoted to sell retail. And then they had to look at some of the pork that they were getting, some of the farmers who sell to them, local farmers, organic farmers, not the ones for the big, the big meat packing plants. But those farmers had some disruption, the ones that sell the meat, because of how they were getting their meat processed. Okay, and they had to take that into account in my son's business for their ordering, right? Pivot, 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 pivot. So even though they planned a month out, 1 week to the next, things changed. So that's a recommendation. Every week, sit down. I recommend either doing it Friday afternoon, which is when most people like it as they're finishing up their week, and then they can have a clear mind for the weekend. But honestly, a lot of us small business people, we work all weekend anyway. So when I usually do it is I do it Sunday night so that I'm ready for Monday morning. So that's my favorite time. All right. And then don't worry about your measures. Just stop, right? So for right now, and later we'll create that. So before I move on to the next thing, questions about this or thoughts, comments, anything on your mind? You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat, either way.
I like the idea of the scenario planning. I think I've been doing some of that. Helps you get past that worst case too, because it's sitting in fear isn't very constructive and doesn't take you anywhere. So you have to kind of get over that and then move to the other options that you have. And I agree that measures at this point, no, they're not predictable. There's no point doing that. This is about survival and keeping some income coming in. It's not so much how much, but just that you are, and you're continuing to help people.
Right.
We all have to help each other in this situation. So
right. So one of the things we did as a family, just the local family, Linda, we had a family Zoom call. And everybody was required to bring a cocktail or a beverage. And we had a conversation as a family, worst case. I mean, we got all the way to the zombie apocalypse out of it, but none of us have laughed that hard. We laughed so hard we cried. Now, what was useful about that was that all of the pent up, like you were saying, Linda, the fear or the concern, we just laid that all out on the table until we saw how silly some of those fears became as you took them all the way down the line, right? And
yeah,
and that actually where the pivot for my son's business came from is once we kind of got through all that, we were just chatting about things, and I said, Jeff, why don't you just sell retail? And he was like, no. And then 2 days later, he was selling retail. So I definitely agree.
and that's just so incredible. He delivers food to people's houses and they leave a cooler out on their front porch. So they get the food they need and comes right to the door. It's safe. I just thought that was a great idea that somebody had.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a really interesting thing. He's gotten to know people in the community way better than he had before. And when the restaurants open up, they're not going to pivot away from their retail people. They're going to keep those. And those retail people get organic. That food is fresh. It comes within 2 days of the day that they deliver it. Most of the food deliveries come on Thursdays and to the farm. And then all the individual deliveries are made on Friday. People's food is super fresh, organic, and packaged really, truly with love. Like it's a really cool thing. And people are, on that Nextdoor app, people have been raving about it. People, I don't know, he doesn't know, it's very cool. So the scenario planning really does make a difference. And, I really highly recommend it. So if that's something that you have not done, And don't start with the best case first, because any worst case stuff that might be in our brains can accidentally infect it. So get the worst case scenario out of the way so that you really got some space to create the more positive, if you will, or more best case outcomes. Okay, so now, because scenario planning was going to take us a little bit too long, I decided not to go into that full thing. But again, like I said, you can read about it on my LinkedIn, or if you send me an email, I'll send you a document with all the info in it. So now I want to talk about the differences between action and practice, because lots of people take lots of action, but we are not very conscious about our practices. On the one hand, you could call practices habits, but I'm not actually talking about habits, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So let's look at action. Action, this is my definition for action: a specific activity with a by when. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in just a minute. Here's what a practice is: a specific action plus a quantity plus a frequency. You can already hear the difference. There's one activity with a due date is an action, and then a specific action with a number of them and a time over which you will do them is a practice. So if you want to stay in effective action, you actually want to design practices that support your business. So let's look at actions here. So purchase a new printer by month end. That's an action. It's a one-time thing. It's got a due date. Now, if you just say purchase a printer, you do not have an action. So an action needs a date by when it will be enacted. This is why lots of things don't get done, by the way. I mean, I've been doing performance consulting for 25 years now. And one of the things that I found over and over and over again, people say, no, I've got by whens. No, they don't. So really do check. If you feel like you've got them, check and just make sure. Like, is it by Friday at 5? Or is it, when I can get to it? Or is it sometime within the month? Usually sometime within the month does not necessarily result in the month. So I'll be more specific. I might say by May 31st. I found like, this is a stupid thing. You'd think I would have known this, right? So I always say invoices are payable upon receipt. That does not work, because payable upon receipt is not specific enough. So I have to say payable by May 15th, payable by May 31st. Because otherwise people interpret upon receipt. You guys probably know this way better than I do, but it took me a long time. Exactly. It took me a long time, years, to figure out I could not say payable upon receipt. So very specific, and that's an action, total due by May 31st. Another example is read 9 Lies About Work. I mentioned that book earlier, before May 15th. Call Joe about the contract by Friday. Join the webinar on Thursday. Now, join the webinar on Thursday, to make it even more specific, I would have said join the webinar on Thursday at 11:30. Or you could have said, send Linda a note and let her know I appreciate the offer, but cannot join the webinar on Thursday. Send by Wednesday night. Those are all actions. They're going to happen one time, and they're going to be done by a specific date. So one of the things that I recommend that you do is look through your to-dos. Do your to-dos have due dates on them? How many things do you have on today's to-do list? Do you have more things than could really be accomplished today? Then go back and look and see, what are you really not going to get done today, and what day will you put it on that you can do it? Then the other thing I would do is I would say, if you've got an action that's going to take a long time, then I would put time in your calendar. I would not just put the action on the to-do list. I would go to my calendar. I would say 9 a.m. To a quarter to 9:45. I'd say research laser printers, right? Because that's not just a minute thing. It's not just go to the website, click the printer and order it if you need to research them. So, and if you don't put enough time in your calendar, it's not going to happen. And then look and see, does your to-do list actually match what's in your calendar for today? So if you have, a 30 item to-do list, but you literally only have a lunch break open today, that is not going to happen. And that mismatch creates stress. And right now, the way that we've always done it is probably not going to work so well right now. Like right now, you have to really look. Maybe your calendar is empty right now. Great. Then go back to the to-do list and see what are those big projects that I needed to do that I've never had time for that I could put in my calendar right now. Or if you're like me, I am way busier right now than I've been like every minute of the day, right? So I have to go back and look and see, okay, these to-dos are not going to get done by then. And then I need to communicate with people because probably half of my to-dos involve my getting info to other people or doing something for someone else. That's not going to work if they're expecting me to have it to them by Wednesday, right? So a couple recommendations. I'm not an affiliate for these. These are just things I've used and I like them. So, check them out if you find them helpful. David Allen is considered the world's guru for productivity. I'm more into performance per se than productivity. But David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, is excellent. He does not even recommend that you read every chapter yourself. He recommends that you pick and choose the things that might be most useful to you. And if you are someone with more time than you had, 2 months ago, then maybe you can put reading a book on your list if you'd like to find out. So some of his tips and tricks are just like, I thought to myself, I read it a couple years ago, wow, I cannot believe I did not think of this on my own, right? Like establishing rules. If you use Outlook, establishing rules in Outlook changes the complexion of your email, depending on how many rules you put in, but it can change it dramatically. Just that one thing is worth the price of his book. So that's one thing I recommend. Then I've tried a number of kind of to-do task apps. I've used the one in Outlook. I don't really care for that one. I don't find it really intuitive. I can list stuff there, but it doesn't work very well for me. I've tried Chaos Control, Priority Matrix, and there's a couple other ones. However, the one that I recommend now, again, no affiliation, is called Todoist. Todoist, I-S-T. And I used the free version for 3 years. And then 2 years ago, I finally purchased it. Love it. It's not very expensive if you decide to go that way. But that I can put stuff in and put a date on it. So it just shows up on the right day for me. I can move stuff around easily. I can put different projects in there. So I can have a project for my finances. So something that I'm not going to handle in QuickBooks today, but I need to not forget to put it in there. You just put it right in that little finance thing and bam, when I go to do finances, all that stuff is sitting there and I can just go right into and put it into QuickBooks. So and it is on my phone, it's on my desktop, and it's on my iPad. So I can work from anywhere. Plus, I'm a person who kind of likes ticking boxes, so I like things that have boxes to tick. But that one is one that I highly recommend. Some of my clients use Asana, A-S-A-N-A, and they like that one because it's directed more towards teams, where teams have various tasks that intersect and intertwine. So I don't have that since I'm a sole proprietor, so that one's not as useful for me, but she finds it really helpful. So those are a couple things about actions to take. Now, I will also put my practices in my to-do list, so I'll tell you about that. So practices, write 500 words each day. So you've got a specific action, you've got a quantity, which is 500, and you've got each day as a frequency. Now, to make it more precise, I would say write 500 words each day until May 31st. I would not have this be a forever practice. Practices should have end dates. Like, I'm going to do this for 3 months, but okay, but what's the end date at the 3 months when you're going to stop? And it doesn't mean you can't continue, but at least when you check it, you go back and go, okay, I can see that this practice worked, but I need a tweak here and there. So I'm going to change it. And then I'm going to practice it again for another 30 days and see if the tweaks actually made the change. My recommendation is that most practices really only be for 30 days so that you could take a check. You can see, how does it work? This is one of the programs that I offer. It's called the Practice of Practicing 30-Day Challenges. And in it, people create 1 to 3 practices that they're going to do every day for a month. And then at the end of the month, we stop and look at what we learned, and we look at what the new practices are. But we also have a community so that we have daily accountability for people doing their practices. So it really supports people in that. So a practice, if it's missing any one of those 3 components, is not a practice. The specific activity, the quantity, and the duration. Okay, so those must be present. Now, here's why practices are useful. There are some things that really require you to do them regularly, not just once. So like if you're writing a book, which is which is why this is one of the practices, right? And my practice is until July 11th. I set up a group that I put myself in. And so by July 11th, the practice is actually, for me, spend 5 hours per week on the book. So that's my practice. Now, that way it allows me to take time to do research and stuff like that. So it's not just writing, and that's what's appropriate for me. So far, in the past 4 weeks, I've written 50,000 words by spending 5 hours a week on the book. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think it was going to be that long, right? So, but if I just said write in the book, that would not get 50,000 words produced. I'll probably have to cut half of those, Linda. Probably. But the practice is what gets me to do something regularly. So you've probably heard this, and maybe you even have this practice, but meditation, especially in times like these, which even if you don't find yourself tense, that the world around you is tense. You know, that people in Oman and India and Australia and Indonesia and Venezuela and Argentina are all, like this right now. We are going to feel that at some level, each of us. So having a meditation or contemplative practice is useful for your energetic experience. It's useful for your brain health, and it's useful for your emotional health. So, but meditating once is not useful. Practicing mindfulness, 3 times in a year is not a practice. Well, it is, but it's not a useful practice. So you might have, like today I was talking to somebody about setting up her practices for May, and she said, well, I think I'm going to meditate, and I'm going to do it for 15 minutes twice a week. I said, no, I don't recommend that. Here's why. It's not enough for meditation. It would be better to have a 3-minute per day practice every day than have 15 minutes 3 times a week or twice a week, right? Because what's needed for the impact of meditation is your regularity. It's not so much the length of time you practice. So, practicing for 5 hours once is not going to get you the impact as 3 minutes a day for 6 weeks. So the practices are very important as a foundation for your actions and your behavior during this time, and for your performance and your success. And so some practices are, like this practice is so useful, even if your clients aren't buying right now. Personally call or text at least, and you create your own number, 5 clients, 2 clients, 1 client, 3 clients each work week, just to touch base. How are you doing? What's happening? Are you ready to open up yet? Happy to just have a call if you ever want to chat, right? Just that reaching out and touching people, especially when we've not been able to physically touch people very often lately, unless you're living with them. One of my practices is pick who I will acknowledge with a message, text, or gift every single day. I do that 7 days a week. So I'll reach out and I'll just say, hey, I was thinking about you today. I hope everything's good. Just that. I'm not doing that to get business. I'm doing that because my business is about people. And if you are a people person, I have a feeling a few of you are, you seem like that already. That if you're not doing something like this, I highly recommend this, or like the practice I was talking about for myself. Review vision mission statements one time per work week for a minimum of 5 minutes and journal what they mean to you today. You know, like things have changed so much every single week, what your vision and mission means. Like Linda, yours right now is probably meaning something a little bit different to you, given the health or lack thereof of small business right now.
Yeah, it does. I've got probably half a dozen clients that I talk to every day. And it's not that I'm billing them for time every day. It's just support. Everyone just really needs some support, some encouragement, somebody cares
Yes, exactly.
to get through all of this. And a lot of it's just new territory. So being in conversation has really been helpful to me as
Exactly.
well as to them.
Right. So if you don't have a practice somewhere in the range of the second bullet there, I highly recommend that. But also in the second one, what does your business mean to you this week? You know, that's why my son pivoted his business. His business, his mission has always been have people know where their food comes from and be delighted by that. He says it a little bit differently. I'm not saying it quite right. But you know, like he started a movement in Dallas where he had people go to restaurants and say, before the virus, where does your food come from? So that when you ordered your food, you said to the server, where does your food come from? So, and that started a whole movement in the downtown Dallas restaurant scene, right? But that was his mission. So then when he suddenly couldn't sell to restaurants anymore, he went, well, the mission is about getting people organic, fresh, healthy, whole food from local providers. Okay, sell retail. Right? So sitting down and doing this work, even if it's only for 5 minutes, is really an important thing for everyone's business right now. What's our vision and mission, and how can we do that this week, given the conditions that we're facing? So these are just some ideas for practices. I want to stop and just give a couple of minutes if people have questions or thoughts, or maybe you've got a practice in mind and just want to check it and see whether or not that's like, is there any tweaks we could make to that practice to make it more effective? And by the way, this is the part where you participate. So please either unmute yourself or put something in the chat for us. Questions, thoughts, comments? I find that no matter what people think they understand, this is a little bit back to Joel's point about thinking you understand how to mute and unmute yourself. But I find that people who think they understand practices, mostly we don't. We don't get the quantity, the duration, and the specific action. Like I had one guy in one of my programs was saying, that he has exercises from his physical therapist, and he wanted to make sure he did them. So that was one of his practices, was do the exercises from my physical therapist each day. All right. And I said to him, do you have a specific plan for what those exercises are, so that you don't have to spell them all out, but what are those exercises? He goes, yeah, absolutely. I know what it is. At the end of the month, he came back and he goes, okay. He said, I can see what happened is that I did the back exercises, but I did not do the cardio because they were on a separate page. So those didn't seem the same to me. And he said, so now I'm going to have to spell that out more clearly for myself because I'm taking the easier path. And that was not what I intended. And that is what happens with our practices. Our mind figures out a way around what we really intended. And the way to handle that is to make the wording of the practice really super specific. Thoughts, Linda?
There's a discipline in that
Yeah.
I think is the biggest challenge is creating a habit of discipline.
Yeah.
We're not generally good at that.
No, and that's why I have a community of people. Like we get into groups and we do it because otherwise we fall apart on it.
Yeah, you just told 10 people you're going to do it. So, well, that's a little more encouragement to get it done.
Well, and if you don't post, the 10 people come back and say, hey, Linda, where are you? What's happening with your practices? Right? So they're really an accountability group. And so that's a real support. But, you know, we have people who, my son is in the challenge that I'm in right now. And so it's kind of a little family challenge. And he has lost, we started on March 16th, this new challenge, and he has lost 26 pounds in that amount of time.
Wow.
We don't have goals in the challenges, we have practices. So that's just a marker for him. His practice is to, and I won't give you the whole specific thing, but about eating keto. So, and one day a month, he allows himself to eat whatever he wants, but that's it, one day a month. Right. Well, so what I'd like to do is just, if you have questions or you have thoughts, I do have a, I have a calendar system that I use. By the way, again, no affiliation, but I highly recommend this as a system. It's called x.ai. That is the website, just the X, a dot, and the letter A and the letter I. And it is the most helpful calendaring system I have ever tried. It just gives me the opportunity to let you come to my calendar, but not, I can also send you a link, you know, like all of that. It's just really a very useful system. It has saved me in the past, let me see, in the past, not quite year, but in the past, since last August, it has saved me at least 100 hours of scheduling time. I put a lot of calls in my calendar, so I highly recommend them. If you need to reach me, I've got a little note here, and feel free to take down my email, and I'm happy to get we'll set up a little bit of a call or something, and I'm happy to just support you in any way that I can. So performance coaching, can see my contact details there, Andrea Bednar at popassociates.com. There's my phone number. Feel free to text me at that number. Just remind me who you are so I don't think it's a spam text. Please feel free to connect with me. And if you're interested, if you really do want to get your practices going and your actions going, I have 2 programs, and I'm happy to talk to you about them. The Practice of Practicing, the 30-day challenges. The next one starts tomorrow, and we have a call tonight. If you're interested, definitely connect with me today, and you could be in the challenge tomorrow. Then I'm starting an elite group performance coaching 6-month program. That program, you have to create an initiative to be in, and I'll help you with that, but it needs to return at least 10 times your tuition in 6 months. And we work out how to actually make that happen. So please feel free to contact me just to chat if you want to. I'm happy to help you, and whatever you need. So Linda, anything, I think you have some closing remarks you want, but that's all I had.
Well, what that brought to mind to me was, I think we need to do a meeting with all of our staff. I think that would be really useful to us and have this conversation. Because everybody's, out there kind of on their own, and we haven't had a staff meeting for a while, and which we normally do once a year. But I think now's a good time to have some of this conversation and just check out those scenarios and see what we come up with and what people are thinking and feeling. And I think that would be really useful to us.
Yeah. And that book I kind of just threw out there, the 9 Lies About Work. In the second chapter, there is some really interesting info about these regular meetings, like you're talking about. Is it MacArthur? I never can remember the right name, but one of the generals in recent history did something that everyone said you shouldn't do. And that was, he created a daily meeting during the war. 2,000 people were in the daily meeting. And he did it 6 days a week. People from all over the world joined that meeting. It turned around the results of their engagement right then.
Wow.
And that is, there's plenty of research to show that people, particularly right now, actually need to be together, not just to, pretend they're having a meeting, but to really get updates, find out what's happening, what's going on. And it only has to be 15 minutes long, but it matters.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today and sharing all of this. It's a lot of food for thought. And we'll see where we can take this. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Have to remember how to unmute.
Joel, and Joel, you're welcome. And yes, grateful for everyone who took some time to attend and hang out with us today. Thank you.
And again, it will be recorded. So if you want to think about it and go back and look at the slides again and all of that, feel free.
Great.
You know when it'll be up, Angie, on the website?
You're on mute, Angie.
There we go.
Yep. Once Andrea gives it to me, then within probably a day or so, I'll have it up.
Okay, super.
Yeah, I'll be able to send it to you, the link today.
Okay, sounds good.
Cool. All right.
Foundations.com.
All right, Linda, are you ready for, if I end the meeting and end the recording, there won't be a chance for you to say anything else. So I just want to make sure you've said everything you wanted to say.
I think that's fine. I really thank all of you for joining us.
Thanks.
And we'll continue doing these. So they're great.
Stay healthy.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.